This is the Agoro Carbon Farming Podcast. Agoro Carbon Alliance is taking action on a global scale to reverse the effects of climate change by decarbonizing farming and restoring carbon to the world's soil. On this podcast, we're going to explore carbon farming from the soil to the atmosphere and how it affects everyone in between. To learn more, visit us at agorocarbonalliance.com. We're back with another edition of the Agoro Carbon Farming Podcast, and today we're going to talk about a new partnership that Agoro Carbon Alliance has created with Graze Master, and we have a couple people that are going to be able to help explain what that partnership is, what that means. One is Del Ficke, who is the founder of Ficke Cattle and Graze Master Genetics, and Larry Hafer, who is the director of sales at Agoro Carbon Farming. Del, thanks for joining us. Del owns and operates Ficke Cattle Company and Graze Master Genetics in eastern Nebraska. He is a fifth-generation rancher with over 35 years of experience as both an agriculturist and a cattleman. Del, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Del has developed a one-of-a-kind trademark breed of composite cattle called the Graze Master. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I don't think I've ever heard of a trademarked cattle composite. What does that mean?
Through history and on the U.S. side of the cattle business, there's been some breeds that have been put together via the composite or crossbred method of combining several breeds to make the breed that suits as ideally as we can find for our situation or our environment. So, yeah, in the past, there's a handful that have been done. It really was the idea of being able to build what we're trying to do on the kind of the perfect cow for our situation and working it into other things in agriculture, like this agreement that we have on the carbon side now with Agoro. So it all really works hand in hand on how agriculture should be looked at differently and really without anything that stifles us in the area of creativity. So, the breed works for us. It would work in a lot of different areas, but it's more the theory or the concept that we can do a lot of different things in agriculture.
As I've looked into your couple organizations, it sounds like your family started farming here in the U.S. in the early 1860s. And even before they came to the U.S., they farmed over in Germany. Tell us a little bit about your 35 years of experience and what you've learned from your father and your grandfather and how things have changed in the cattle industry.
Well, in my time in this, I think I've come to the conclusion I know very little at the end of the day. It's a moving target on a lot of different things they're ever changing. And so my grandfather was a bona fide naturalist, barefoot naturalist is what I always called him. And he was a real character and really tied in with nature. My father, kind of came along at a time when the whole ag deal was really going to more of an industrialized type mindset and maybe losing some of the ideals that had been working so well. And I won't get into all the reasons why that happened, but so I think I was a kind of a sandwich between my dad and my grandfather in their ways. And I think now, I take what my father had taught me in more of a structured way and coupled it with what my grandfather was saying. And we built this natural breed of cattle. We're working on programs like these carbon programs and soil health deals and things like that. So, it really doesn't matter, how long we've been in this deal. It's the future generations that matter. And if we don't get this right, there will be no resources left for, these future generations.
From a process of raising cattle, when I think about it, I have some experience working on my uncle's dairy farm in northern Utah. And, there's a lot of silage, corn silage and alfalfa baled hay. It seems to me that there was a lot of that in ranching where you're processing the food and feeding it to them. Has that changed? Is that the main change that maybe your father went down and now you're kind of going back to maybe more philosophy of your grandfather?
Absolutely, Scott. I mean, you're spot on with that analogy, because my grandfather was really raising livestock, not just cattle, but livestock in a very holistic type natural manner. And then people come along and started to talk to my dad's generation about, well, if you add this to the feed, or if you put up this facility to, like you were talking about, that holds silage, if you do all this, you can make this much more money. But all we did was spent more money on the infrastructure and ideas, really depleted our soil and other resources in the process, and it made for just so much additional work that it can make sense to me now, even though I was in the middle of that. It just doesn't make sense that I even went that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a really, I say farmers ranchers suffer from the Stockholm syndrome. We become friends with our captors, and I was there. And one thing about when we get all this switched, the environment gets better, the soil gets better, our water gets cleaner, our animals are healthier, and of course our food supply then is way healthier. So it's taking a step back and doing some things that we know worked, even though it might not be on the front cover of the glossiest farm magazine.
For every rancher or farmer, it's all about their right to farm. It's all about the on-farm profit. And it seems like when your dad came around that there was an idea that by feeding them the silage and processing the corn and cutting the alfalfa and bringing the alfalfa to the cattle, that would improve on-farm profits. And what you're telling me is maybe that wasn't sustainable on some level, and going back to the pasture grazing process is a better method.
Sure. I mean, when we think about, not all those things were done in vain. They were the technology or the ideas of the time. There was a time that, we used to feed, our country and much of the world. We don't raise a lot of crops now that we even, put into a food deal. But when they were, especially coming out of World War II, synthetic nitrogen, or that nitrogen that they didn't have,
Mm-hmm.
even though they were putting on manure and everything that was better, that took more time, that took more people, all that. The uptick that the nitrogen brought really probably saved the world through a very difficult time of trying to rebuild grain stocks and things like that. So it wasn't all in vain, but now we know that we certainly sacrificed a lot of things, not just the resources, but we sacrificed farm and ranch families and communities that all used to be very vibrant, or more so than they are now, in the process.
Yeah. The reason why I have you tell your story is I think it's fascinating that sometimes we think that progress is better just because we're quote unquote progressing. And sometimes we have to look back at some of the ways things were done before we thought we progressed, and we find that is even a better way to do it. Let's get into this soil story. You mentioned through your explanation that you were depleting the soil when you were growing the corn for silage or the alfalfa. And now that you're not doing that part, that the soils have started to regenerate. Can you explain how that all works?
So, yeah, I just need to clarify. There's a lot of corn, soybeans, alfalfa, and crops being raised right now,
Mm-hmm.
Through no-till. A lot of the practices that this program, or what the carbon deal is trying to really do, are multifaceted, for not just, soil health, or not just getting money to these farmer ranch families. It's really an environmental and global solution. So absolutely, the way I was doing it years ago, even though we started a no-till in the late 80s or 90s, early 90s, someplace in there, we thought that was the end-all cure-all. We didn't have to do anything else. Well, we saved time, we saved some money on fuel and things like that, and we started to turn that soil around, because we weren't disturbing it. It wasn't that violent going through there with some type of tillage equipment
Mm-hmm.
that really wreaks havoc on the communication system and all the microbial energies and everything that are in the soil. And so we know how to do things better. And a lot of times people aren't really too excited to change unless they have to. And this is a kind of a program, or what we've done in the past on the soil health side, that's got people thinking about, hey, there might be a better way. We have to remember that civilizations have fallen because of depletion of resources. The crazy thing about it is the U.S. probably holds the record of depleting our soil faster than any other civilization in history. So when I talk to somebody about this and they're like, well, how long will it take to get our soil good again? I'm like, well, 3 to 5 years, it's going to be really, really rocking, and at least on the way to do cool things with it. And they're like, gosh, I don't have that much time. And I'm like, well, it took you 150 or 200 years to deplete it. We can start rebuilding it in 1 to 3 or 3 to 5 years. And then they're like, oh, no, that makes sense. But the first part of regenerative type thinking or regenerative agriculture and soil health is regenerating the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we need to start.
Yeah, it's a paradigm shift, isn't it?
Absolutely.
As I mentioned at the top of the program, Agoro Carbon recently partnered with Graze Master Group to help them advise farmers and ranchers across the U.S. on these sustainable management practices that Dell talks about that are practical and also profitable. Larry, talk to us a little bit about how you networked with Dell and how did those talks go, and what are the synergies that you have now with this partnership with Graze Master Group?
Sure, I'd be glad to, Scott. I think I've known Dell for many years. A lot of our cattle training, a lot of my cattle training and cattle experience came from his family as well. So it's and it was an interesting opportunity for us to start having conversations and looking at how could we form a partnership that could be beneficial. And I think one of the biggest advantages that I seen early on was Dell and his group's dedication to their customers and the producers they work with. It's a very selfless approach on how they're doing it. They really look at the opportunity of truly helping farmers and ranchers, communities. And it aligns really very well with Agoro's values and what we're trying to do with assisting, growers in this carbon journey. And, Dell touches many more facets of the soil health piece in the industry than we probably do. The carbon part of it's just a piece of it. But what's exciting about it is we get an opportunity to truly be partners, and our vision, I think, is really close. The team of people that he has working with him works very well with our group. And I think it's just going to be a really neat opportunity for growers to be able to be successful and understand and have this, the challenge with the carbon space today is, educating folks. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of confusion out there, and Dell and his group do a great job of working with us to bring that message into a really grassroots kind of a process, which I think is really important as you look at, how we continue to work and move forward. Dell's group also encompasses a vast geography that is very interesting and helped us look at diversification a little bit as well, as we looked at the market and how we can do that. And then one of the real main points is our focus in the range and pasture segment of the business at this point in time. They were just a really good fit. And so we're super excited about this opportunity because we just have the same vision, and it really is truly a partnership that is built for success.
Dell, as I've been around agriculture, trust is probably one of the key attributes in agriculture. You work with people you trust. And I think most farmers and ranchers are pretty skeptical of new things or new ideas. And it seems like with the growers and ranchers that you're working with, they have developed that trust with you. How did you build that trust and add value to their operations over this long period of working with them?
Well, I mean, the biggest part is just it takes a long time to build a reputation. It takes longer to build a good reputation than it does to build a bad one. And so, we've got the chance to work with these people across the country, and it's been a real blessing to get in front of so many people that really, in a lot of ways, teach us as much as we teach them for their program, our program, whatever we're involved with. So it's exciting with these people that we've got to meet, but it's reputation is everything. And and I tell people this a lot, I said, we don't promote things that we don't believe in and that we don't use ourselves. And so that takes a lot of the due diligence for the other people kind of out of it. Great example is this morning working on some carbon acres. It came up, the guy said, well, if Dell says this is a good program, that's all I need to know.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's the kind of people we want to send there. We want to do that vetting or that due diligence. And that's what everyone in the Graze Master Group does. I mean, we've got financial planners that help run farm and ranch stuff. We've got communication, marketing people. We've got community builders. We've got inputs. We got a soil lab on that. They're all people we work with, and they're all people we trust. Else we wouldn't be, associating ourselves with it. And that really takes a lot of pressure off of farmers and ranchers because, we hang our hat on our reputation, and that's the way we're going to do it. We want good acres. We want good people. We want to help everyone with this. And I think back to what Larry was saying too, I'm 100% agree with him. These two groups, Graze Master and Agoro, on this line up perfectly. Mm-hmm. I mean, we all have the same ideas and the same heart.
I read on your website, and I think this is important to know, that this isn't just a rubber stamp approach, that each ranch is very unique, and that your team goes out and meets with these ranchers and creates an individual plan for them. Can you tell us a little bit about that? It sounds like you learn from them just as much as they're learning from you, but how do you customize this approach?
Well, and that's a great piece to bring up, because there's not two fields, even if they're side by side, or two paddocks, pastures, rangeland, whatever, that are the same. And, just because the ownership is the same across maybe 20,000 acres of grass, the variation, and in that variation comes a whole lot of opportunity, but there's also things that you really have to take in consideration and treat it all differently. So as we work to sequester carbon and make the world a better place and make these farms and ranches better, it's really boots on the ground, understanding what they've done in the past, what their goals are. And, the most important piece of equipment, I've said this thousands of times in my regenerative soil career, is the spade.
Yes.
You dig, you touch, you smell, you can taste it, whatever you want to do. But when we get the soil right, when the soil is healthy, when we're sequestering carbon and building organic matter and all those things, all of society gets better. So it's not just that we're standing out on that farm or ranch. It's a huge, huge benefit for everything globally. And so this is a very important role, that the Graze Master Group is looking at as being part of a solution, and a really big part of that education. So, like I said, every paddock, every field is different, but not everyone understands that, it needs to be that finite or that precise, on how we're doing this.
So as you've been developing the Graze Master Group and creating all of the tools and adding value to the ranchers that you're going out and meeting with and developing trust with them, why did you team up with Agoro Carbon Alliance? Why was that something that you felt needed to be added?
Well, I've got a bit of a past in the carbon industry, but I've had a huge opportunity to work with so many different carbon ideas or theories. And, there's a lot of carbon companies out there, and we had probably been through, as a Graze Master Group, 30 to 40 different companies really trying to find, and they all do something good. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying they're bad companies. But back to what Larry was saying, they didn't align with our goals and our heart. And then even kind of at least 50% on the other side of it was they didn't recognize pasture and rangeland for carbon sequestration because they didn't feel, through a lack of understanding, that that was the place that we can sequester a lot. Well, you've got the ocean, you got the forests, and then you got the grasslands for ability to sequester carbon. And so this is a perfect fit. I mean, we want to deal with farmers and ranchers that have, the grassland or pasture acres. They might have some row crop acres, or they might have a lot of row crop acres and a little pasture. But there was no other program that lined up with our values and the people, and then the offering with what they were doing on those types of acres.
Larry, as you've been working with Dell and the growers and ranchers that he's working with, what are some of the big questions that, or maybe hesitancies that you hear from those growers and ranchers?
Scott, it's kind of interesting because we get a lot of them the same always come up. Is this real? Is what we're proposing, and what you guys are doing, is this something that's viable, and is this something that is sustainable? We have to, and I think through some of our initial success, we're a fairly new company, obviously, and working through a lot of different obstacles in that educational journey. So the education piece has been huge, to walk people through, what is it to sequester carbon? What is it to generate our focus is on high quality credits, which takes, a tremendous amount of time to do. In terms of what an agricultural person thinks, it's not a annual corn crop or this. I mean, these changing in behaviors and putting these practices in place, it's a long-term commitment. And there's a lot of things that we have to work through and talk through. And that's where Dell's group is going to be so helpful for us in helping with that journey, because it's not just, hey, sign a contract with us, everything's going to be great. It's a 10-year commitment, and it's a true partnership. And we have to, walk alongside those farmers and ranchers every step of the way to make sure that they benefit in the end, when those opportunities are there and the financial side is there. And so I think those are some of the biggest challenges we see, is just lack of education. There's also a lot of, Dell said it. I mean, they talk to 30 some carbon type companies, and there's a lot of noise out there in the industry. There's a lot of different approaches to it. And so we have to, work really hard to make sure that our story's told, and have had some really good success, and look forward to them helping us strengthen that as we continue to work with folks.
I like that. Dell, how has this added value to the farmers that you're working with? So you've gone out there and said, okay, we need to make these practice changes. This is going to reduce your overhead. It's going to improve your bottom line. Why even go down the road of carbon sequestration? You've already taught them how to be more financially stable or sustainable, and how to improve their soil. Why add this carbon sequestration, carbon credit part to your equation?
Because it's probably the biggest part of the equation. So as people start to change their soil and get it better and do things that, are conducive to building better soil, the next logical step is finding something on more of a global type or national type, however you want to look at it. But, this is really a concern for all the world as we try to do these things. But it's like, hey, is there some money out there, especially on the cow side of things or livestock side of things? They struggle in a different way, and there's not a lot of places they can get money for improvements other than their own money and going to the bank and things like that. So when you can go out with a program and say, hey, there's money here for doing the right thing, which is kind of a catch-22, because most people think they're doing the right thing currently. So when you start talking about, no, this is really kind of the right thing, how we need to think about it and how we need to approach this. So when you can help them financially to really start making a difference, well, of course it helps them, but it helps the company, and it helps the overall big picture of really trying to get this environment maybe back to a more stable type place. It's a big offering, it's a big task, but there's rewards on all sides of it through the soil health and through getting into this program and just doing a lot of things better, different, saving money, thinking that, the box doesn't exist. I mean, just be standing out there trying to figure that out, how to make it better. And that's where people don't always know where those resources are. And that's why this partnership really gives us a 1-2 punch in this, that, hey, we've got a program, but we got the professionals to really help you make your operation better.
I want to ask you a quick question, Del, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with Ficke Cattle Company, you also have a meat company. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a small local meat company that my son and daughter-in-law actually handle, and our location is beautiful for it. We're 14 miles from Lincoln, Nebraska, capital city, 70 miles from Omaha. So for all the times I've complained that we didn't end up in a place that, a cool place, scenic place, we really ended up in a place to make something like that work. And probably besides location, my success on the soil consulting side and speaking and things like that, which I don't know, some days I doubt that I had success. Other days I feel pretty good about it. But people want to come out and they want to get the tour of the farm. They want to see how we're doing things different. Everybody that comes has to smell the soil. We always dig up a spade full of soil. And we have to talk about that. And the story is important. The location is great, but it fits with what we're doing because we kind of built that breed to do really well on forage. We're a grass finished operation, or forage, no grain on this meat product. So it all fits hand in hand, and it makes it a nice educational type package, along with providing a really healthy product for our neighbors.
Well, I think where I was trying to go with this is a lot of the things that you're doing and a lot of the practices that Agoro Carbon Alliance preaches to get these carbon credits are good for the farm. They're good for the environment and for the sustainability. And it sounds like it actually may trickle down to the consumer, that the consumer is probably more aware of what they're putting on their plate than they ever have been before. And when they see the way that you are doing it, it seems like there would be a good response from the consumer. Is that close to being true?
Well, the true, 100%. So that one of the true biggest benefits is for the public. And it's when we get these soils right, when we get the soils healthy, exactly what this program's doing, while rewarding people for doing the right thing, our food supply gets better, our health gets better, everything. It's a super big win for the public, who is going to have more and more to say about how we raise things. And we have to be equipped to be, A, we need to be doing the right thing, but B, we have to be, equipped to do the right thing with the public perception. They need to know that we're doing the right thing, not just a story they're being told, not protecting what we've always done that maybe hasn't been right. But this is for the, we have a deal at Ficke Cattle Company, we call it a global partnership. It's global and local, and this is a program that really epitomizes doing the right thing every place.
Well, Del, from where I sit, it sounds like you're onto something here.
Well, I hope so.
I know that you've been working on it for a very long time, and I think it's interesting that your grandfather probably was a little closer than we probably care to admit. But I think it's great that you're doing this. I think that this partnership, it sounds like it's a very good partnership. If someone is out there that's a rancher that wants to learn more, Larry, where would you suggest they go?
You bet. And we can share that information in, going to the Agoro website would be great. We actually have a landing page that we work with the Graze Master Group in conjunction with ourselves that they can access information and reach out to Dell's team and our team to really get started down that path and look to where this partnership can help them.
Excellent. Dell, I will also include a couple links to your websites, the cattle company, of course, the Graze Master Group website as well. So if anybody wants to contact you there, I think that's a great way to learn more. And I have to compliment you, Dell. It's like I said earlier, it's really hard to develop trust in the agriculture community. It sounds like you have it. I love the story that says, well, if Dell says that we should do it, we should do it. And that's really all they need to hear. And I hope that you have a lot of success. I hope that you continue to preach the gospel of better soils and healthier cattle and healthier, sustainable future.
Thank you. I think we are onto something, and we're blessed with this partnership, and hopefully this is something that lasts a long time, and we do a lot of good for a lot of different people.
You've been listening to the Agoro Carbon Farming Podcast, where we bring you knowledge on how to sustainably and profitably transform farming through carbon cropping. To learn more about how you can become a partner, visit us at agorocarbonalliance.com or follow us on our many social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn.